And then you'll just say something.
Yeah, okay. Yep, looks like we're live, so we'll just give everybody another minute at 6:59. We'll give everybody a minute to get here, and then we'll welcome everyone to our webinar. Okay, it looks like people are coming into the room, and it's just 7 o'clock, so Ginger, we'll go ahead and we'll get started.
Okay.
Yeah, well, welcome everyone to our webinar. I'm Marianne from In the Company of Horses here in New Jersey, and I'm actually with Ginger Krantz, who's also in New Jersey, which is different for me. I usually have somebody from either a different part of the United States or somebody from all across the world who joins us. So I'm happy to have Ginger, who's also right here in New Jersey. So I'm going to keep just letting everybody kind of show up in the room. I see people are crowding in, they're getting their seats together and pushing in close. So we'll just keep giving everybody just a little bit of time to get in the room, and then we'll let Ginger introduce herself and talk to us a little bit about. Well, Ginger, the first thing I'd like to know is first if you could just share a little bit about who you are and how you found this idea of earth horse healing, how you found your healer's journey, and you know, what got you started on this path?
Wow. Well, it goes back. I guess it goes back to 1990, 1980, 88, 89. When I was and I was an artist, and I was living in Manhattan, and I was painting, and I had I had also I had purchased that year my first horse. I had started riding again. I was living in Manhattan. I had started riding at Claremont Riding Academy, and I'm having this is a little strange for me, like talking, but there's no one here.
I know. Well, I can just tell you, Ginger, that the room is really crowded. Okay, so there really are lots.
Hi, everybody.
There you go.
All right. Well, so let me just get beyond that. So,
Yeah.
so I had this passion for horses all my life. And I started riding again because I was working in Manhattan, and I just felt disconnected from nature. And I started riding again at Claremont Academy. And that sort of progressed to me commuting out to Long Island and riding there on weekends. And sort of parallel to that, I was working in my studio doing paintings and things like that. And I was working on, I had started riding my horse, I was having lessons, and I was having problems with connecting my left and right while I was riding. My trainer had pointed out to me that when she was giving me direction, I had like a disconnect where I couldn't coordinate my left and right sides. Like my left side wasn't responding to her direction. So I hadn't really noticed this was happening, but she pointed it out to me, so it got me really curious. And at the same time, I had been practicing Tai Chi, and I was starting to get into meditation. And so what I started to do was I had learned about visualization, so I decided to start doing some visualization of trying to get some coordination from left to right in my body. And what happened was I ended up purchasing my first horse, and I was commuting out to Long Island to ride him, so I had this long time on the train, just downtime, which was really welcome because I was working hard and a lot of hours in the city, and it's sort of a stressful environment anyway. So I would sit on the train and I would meditate and visualize. I was visualizing my spine being aligned, and I wanted to have my posture be better while I rode my horse. because back then I also was my body was very different. It was very forward, and I tended to clutch when I get frightened on a horse, you pull forward. So I was trying to focus on having better alignment and then more balance left to right. And this all paralleled in my studio. What I did is I had been doing a lot of work. My artwork also reflected the body, okay? And at the time, my progression of my artwork had come to a point where I was working with images of the body, and I was painting on those images. I was Xeroxing portions of my body on a copier, because that's what we did back then. We used copy machines, right? And I was then mounting those and painting on them. And I started working on a series where on the spine. In this case, I got an image from the library of the spine, right? And I started mounting those on paper, and then I was visualizing the spine and painting this up and down the spine, like energy flowing, and I was visualizing these meditations, and I'm sitting on the train to go see my horse because I want to be this better rider and have this whole thing come together, right? So what happened was I started to have, during these meditations, sitting on the train, going into all this, I started to have these, and this was after I'd been doing it a while, I started to have these sensations in my body that were very different at the base of my spine. There was like a vibration, and at the time I would describe it as like jello. It was like like this weird vibration, and it was sort of uncomfortable. So I had and then I would go to the barn, and I would ride my horse and close down the barn and commute back to Manhattan and get home at like 11:30 at night. But after I was doing this, probably 4 nights a week after working in the city, and so after a few times of this happening, it started to get really uncomfortable. Like I started to have this, it was getting painful. So I got home one night, and I was like, this is really painful, and I reached down to like really massage that area in my body, and I was shocked. I was really shocked, because if we back up a bit to when I was like, I don't know, 6 years old, one of my good friends had a slip and slide, and we used to run, if you know what those were, they were like a big sheet of yellow plastic.
Yeah, yep.
And water would flow down it, and you'd run and you'd slide right on your butt. And so I had fallen on that slip and slide, my friend's slip and slide, and I had broken my tailbone. Oh. And the reason I knew it was because I heard at the time, but I had also had a doctor, a gynecologist, had pointed it out to me when I had an exam. She said, you see, if you put your hand there, you should be able to feel your tailbone, but you can't. You must have broken your tailbone. And I said, oh, yes, I remember breaking my tailbone. Okay. So I knew that I was supposed to feel my tailbone, but I couldn't. And so that night, when I came home after all this visualization and the vibration and everything, and I reached my hand down there, well, I could feel the end of my tailbone. And I was pretty shocked. So that was the beginning of my healing journey, because I had to accept from my own personal experience that bones could move, and that was, for me, that was a really sort of shocking thing. It took a lot to assimilate that. I actually got scared, and I got nervous about what I was doing, and I sort of pulled back from that for a while, and I asked for some guidance, and I said I need to learn about what's going on here, and I was given an image which ended up being the cover of Barbara's book, which I actually walked past a bookstore and saw, I don't know, some short period after that. And then that's where I just ended up I just went and listened to Barbara talk, and then signed up for the school, because it was exactly, I realized that the things that she was talking about and what she was seeing, because Barbara is clairvoyant, in the energy field was what I was painting in my studio when I was in this room with all these white walls and all these white pieces of paper with images of my body. I was basically painting the energy and the chakras and the things that were happening in the energy field. So it just seemed like a natural place for me to go.
Yeah, it's really cool, Ginger. I hear so many things in what you're saying. First of all, let me just say, what will we not do for the love of a horse? I mean, a horse comes into our life, and all of a sudden everything is different, and there you are, I mean, like, I should say, here we are, because you got a horse, you know, and you wanted to be better for your horse. And I've done the same thing, you know, I've done all kinds of things to have me be better for, you know, for the love of a horse. And for anybody who's been to Ginger's website, or if you've gotten an advertisement for this webinar, you'll see that picture of Ginger with that big giant red horse, and that's the very same horse that Ginger's talking about. He's been with you how long now, Ginger?
Well, he turns 30 in June, and I've had him since he was 4, and he's my first and only horse. So you know, it's big.
A long time, yeah. That's 26 years, so that's really super exciting. You know, it's really super to know. And then the other thing that I'm hearing in what you're saying is, you know, really, it sounds to me like it's really just the power of focus. You know, you really focused on something. You began not only creating clear mental pictures for yourself, but because you're an artist, you had an ability to draw those clear mental pictures and got it so clear for yourself that you actually were able to, you know, create that. And I don't honestly think that's strange at all. And I could hear that you said that you were afraid in the, you know, when it started to happen, and having been in some of your classes, I know that can happen. But you know what's interesting about that, you know, I've been spending all this time really teaching people the power of focus, and I'm so thrilled that you shared that in your story, because we're creating stuff all the time, and it's almost like we're loose cannons unless we know what we're doing, you know. So kind of let's just focus on what it is that we want, and know that all things are possible. So I loved, I do want to hear more about the next piece of the journey, which is you're in Manhattan, and you're a graphic artist. You were working, that's what you were doing all day long, right? You were working as a graphic artist in Manhattan, probably wearing high-heeled shoes and all that stuff, and you know, doing your commute out and back, and then so you found Barbara Brennan's school. And so tell us a little bit about that journey, because I know that was not a short journey.
Well, first of all, just to get really clear, I was not wearing high heel shoes. Those came off probably 9 months after I graduated from college, and I was wearing the high-heeled shoes. No, but health has always been, like, my mother really instilled to me that health was wealth. Health was the most important thing in life. Without health, you had nothing. So that's always been a real guiding factor in my life. And so when I was wearing those high-heeled shoes, and I had them in, like, all colors, you know, I started to get a bunion, and I quickly realized it was from those high-heeled shoes, and
off they came.
They came, and I've been in flats or my Earth shoes ever since. So, but anyways, yeah, Barbara Brennan School was really very. I was very fortunate to be there at a very vital time. You know, really in the peak of the school, and it's an international school, and at the time I was there, my freshman class it's a 4-year program. My freshman class was over 100 students. We had over 400 students in the school, and it's quite a commitment. We met for 5 weeks out of the year for 4 years, and you went through a program. And Barbara, being a NASA astrophysicist, she brought her scientific background and her research to the program, and it really helped me understand something, because it was so totally new to me. About you know, energy and how it's been validated, you know, with different experiments over the years, and the history behind it and the science behind it. She brought all that to the curriculum, which was wonderful, as well as she's clairvoyant, she could see the energy field, and she had a whole map for the chakras, which we all learned, and different methods of working with the field, the energy field, you know, the human energy field that, you know, permeates and extends beyond the body. So it was a very extensive program, involved homework. You had to do a thesis your senior year. It was a huge commitment. It was very consuming. And then when I graduated, I was invited to join the faculty. So that was really wonderful too. I really, really enjoyed then the opportunity to teach the material, and And then I went from teaching the students to teaching the teachers and mentoring the teachers. And that I really loved, because I love teaching, but that's what I love about my workshops too, is I really love to mentor. I love to bring people out and show them that this material, everyone can do this material, and to really be there for people, with helping them hands-on and assisting them and coaching them and bringing them forth. That's really my passion, because I'm just one person, and this work is something people can learn and do, and my goodness, the horses love it, as you've seen. They really respond to it, and they need it. So
Yeah.
I like to get other people involved.
I hear what you're saying, Ginger, and that's been my experience too. Is that you are someone who's able to teach the work, and I bet it's because you had such a profound experience of learning the work. Like, you kind of did the work, and then you kind of learned how to do the work. You kind of did it. You did it first,
Yeah.
and then you went and learned how to do it. And I think that's that way of learning it probably instilled it so deeply in you. You never had to question, is this working or is this not working, because you knew that it was.
Well, I think that's the beauty of having a class and coming and being with community, and what I like to help people with, because I think as a healer there's always some level of self-doubt, at least when you start. And I don't want to say at least when you start, I mean always. I mean, I think that's one of the part of the healer's journey, is learning how to be with self-doubt and overcome self-doubt, and to just recognize for what it is and not have it get in the way. But especially when you're first starting, it's really important to come to a group situation like a class like the Healing with Horses workshops, because then you can explore that self-doubt and realize you're not alone in it, and your teacher can help you and say, well, validate things for you. I mean, that's what I love to do, is validate students, their experience, their high sense perception, and give them that foundation. I mean, that's my job in the introductory, is to really give people a foundation of faith in what they're experiencing, and that they can do this.
Now, you just said something. You said validate their high sense perception. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm.
Can you say more about that?
Oh, yeah, okay. That's HSP. That's really high sense perception, a term Barbara Brennan would sort of coined. It basically the senses that we have, the five senses we have, the physical senses beyond the physical. There's hearing perception, feeling perception, sight perception. So helping people validate those, and their experiences of those when they're working with the animal. Because when you're laying your hands on an animal and you're touching them and you're exploring them and what's going on, you're going to get things like some people might get a flash of an inner organ, or they might feel something, heat or vibration. So what is all that, and how do you sort all that out? And my job is to help people sort that out, so they know where they're at and what they're working with. Does that make sense, Marianne, from your experience? Does that help?
Absolutely, but it does. It makes sense, and you could call it a lot of different things. You could call it that inner knowing or that intuition or whatever it is, which I like, because I think that's really valid. And there's a little person at my door. So yeah, I think that someone validating that is helpful, and yes, it definitely answers my question. There's no doubt about it, and that's definitely been my experience in your workshops. And while we have this pause right here, I just want to take this opportunity to invite people to use the little chat box on the side and ask any questions. And as these questions come in, I'll try to incorporate them in things that Ginger is saying, and help you guys try to figure out, get the answers to your questions. And we also decided we're going to do a fun little thing. And we're going to put this little poll up, and I'm going to give a little more time. I'm going to wait until like 7:30, and then I'm going to put a little poll up. And the poll question is simply, why are you here? Are you interested? Why are you interested in this work? Are you interested in this work for horses, or for cats, or dogs, or people, or some other reason? Okay, so when I stick that little poll out there, I'd love it if you guys would just respond. But Ginger, that kind of does bring us to, let's talk about the animals. Let's talk about, the horses, the cats, the dogs, and the people. Mm-hmm. Tell us about that.
Well, Maybe ask me a little more specific questions. So,
well, I know I know that, obviously currently you're now called Earth Horse Healing. So it sounds to me like you only work on horses. And I know you didn't start there. I know that that's not where you started. I know that, the school, the Hands of Light School, is a school that teaches people to work on people.
mm-hmm.
So that's probably where you started. And then how did you incorporate that into the horses, and how did you bring that into cats and dogs? And what's your experience now, in your practice? Like, do you mostly work on horses or other animals, or their people, or both, or that kind of thing?
Well, what happened was when I was going to school, and I had this new horse, and by the time I was into a year, there was starting to be some issues with my horse, and I started to ask questions. And when a woman at the barn who was a chiropractor helped me point out that my horse had one hip that was 2 inches higher than the other, I started to look at things differently and ask questions, and I started to apply what I was learning at school to my horse. Just like we were supposed to go home and do homework on people, I just did it on my horse and the people, right?
I love that. You were the girl in the class with the horse. I love that, because in every area of life, whenever you go to yoga or herbal school or Tai Chi, there's always a girl in the class with a horse.
Right. So I was the one in the school out of 4 years with the horse, and I got quite the reputation, because what happened was we also would have at school, we would have a section where we would talk about cases, people we were working with and stuff, and I wanted to bring my horse to that. And I was told I couldn't because it wasn't a human. So I asked Barbara, and Barbara said she allowed me to, because I told her, this is a situation, this is my horse, I love this, I'm learning from it, I'm finding that the skills we're learning with people are applying to my horse, I'm having results, I've written it all up like a healing, and she said, okay, fine, that I could bring it to case. So my horse came into the school, and people got really fascinated by it, and they wanted to hear about him and what was going on with him. And then what happened was, when I became a teacher, I had the opportunity to teach a class. It was an elective outside the class in the evenings about working, and I taught it with 2 of my colleagues in the school that also had a passion for animals. We talked about how to apply all the healing skills to animals. So that was really a wonderful thing. And I think that for me, when I work with the horses, I work with a lot of horses in New Jersey because there are a lot of horses here. I tend to work with the horses in person. I have a few horses I work with, long distance, but I tend to have a long distance. I do a lot of long distance sessions with people with cats and dogs. And I often wonder why that is. I think a lot of those people are just accustomed to doing long distance sessions with people.
Well, say more about that, because clearly I know, having been in your company, like what happens, with the people, like in classes, or with the horses, like, when we're working with them. But talk to us a little bit about, how do you do this work long distance? Like, how does it go?
Well, obviously there's not the hands-on piece involved, but it's just as effective. It's I have to depend more on spirit, really, when I'm at home and I'm working with them. Like, I talk to the person before they filled out the sheets and intake form about the animal, what's going on, and then we have a discussion on the phone at the time after I've gone over the sheet to find out what needs to be worked on, what their areas of concern is, and then we hang up the phone and I work with the cat or dog, and then I call them when I'm done and we debrief. So I connect with the animal at a distance. I get a feeling for the animal, and I see the animal in my mind's eye, and I work just like the animal's right there. I work with my hands just like the animal's right there, and
Well, actually, Ginger, it sounds very similar to what you did on the train.
Right, visualization, right. I think on the train, though, I was more actively visualizing. With this, it's more receptive visualization, because you're working with something, it's not me. So I'm receiving from the animal, right? I'm dialoguing with the animal. I ask the animal where it's hurting or what's going on, and it's presented, things like that.
And then I would guess, too, I don't know if I'm guessing or if I remember this from class, then you can tell me, the goal is always going to be the perfection, or having it all working well. So being able to see the animal with everything that's working in perfect harmony with everything else. Like on the train, when you were, visualizing your own spine and then started drawing that, you were seeing, I'm guessing you were seeing a perfect spine, a perfectly straight spine.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Marianne. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah. No, good. So was I being
the point of things? You're moving towards the feeling, the seeing, the experiencing, holding the space for the ideal manifestation of that animal's body, mind, wherever the place of the injury is or whatever, back to an ideal sort of form. Yes. And then, and in terms of your working with people, I still work with people because I work with owners, I work with students, and I get so many of the people, they tell me that it's not just the work I do with the animal, it's how much I help them see through their animal's eyes, how I help them really understand what's going on with their animal and how their animal thinks or how their animal's perceiving things. So that's a big part for them in terms of healing and understanding.
So can you say more about that? Because what are you really saying when you're saying that you are helping them understand their horse's perceptions or how their horse thinks or sees things through their horse's eyes? Say more about that. What do you mean?
Well, when I work with the animals, I'm merging with them very deeply, right? So I'm experiencing them intimately. Okay, so animals don't necessarily, they don't think in words like we do, right? But I'm perceiving their reality, what their concerns are, where their pain is, what their needs, desires are, and their reality of the relationship with their owners. And so I can convey that to the owners, and that helps them.
Can you give us some examples?
Well, it has to be generic for privacy, that's the thing.
Yeah, well, if you could just share something that happened recently,
Well, I would say that I'm trying to think, like I've helped, well, I think like a situation where I'm with a horse in person, I've had owners not understand what's going on with their horse, let's say. Or maybe they've had a vet or 2 or 3, which has happened, look at them. And I'm not saying that I have any, I think, people need to use vets, and I don't replace a vet. But I have another perspective, right, where I can dialogue with the horse. So there's been instances where I've been able to ask the horse what's going on, and where maybe that issue has not been able to be defined, the horse makes it clear to me.
Okay, perfect. Can you say more about that? Okay,
I can give you an example. This one sticks out so markedly to me because it was so marked at the time. An individual had a horse that had, several vets had seen it, and they thought it was an issue, a particular issue, a shoulder issue, and the horse was having some very adverse behavior when it was asked to canter. Okay, it was bolting, or so. Other than that, it was comfortable. So they couldn't figure out what was going on, and then they had determined it was the shoulder, and the shoulder had been worked on by an acupuncturist and a chiropractic, but it hadn't lasted more than a very brief time. So she didn't know what was going on, and she was really at a point where she didn't know what to do with this horse, right? She loved her, but she didn't know what to do with her. So I asked the horse, and the horse simply touched me where the pain was, and I felt the pain, and I absolutely saw when the image of when the rider gets in the saddle, how it compressed. It was a spinal issue. When the saddle compressed that area of the body, I felt directly in my spine in the same location when she touched me, and I saw the image of how it was compounded by the saddle. So it was very clear to me.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I know I've had that experience in your classes. So that's not something specific to you. That's definitely something that the animals will tell us if we can only listen.
Yes. And just to I want to carry that train too, but also just to say that then the woman said, oh, and she had a vet come and she got an injection in that part of the body and it took care of the issue. It didn't. It was limited in its holding though. But yeah, but it was. I had the validation there from the vet when they came and did an injection in the spot. So, but yes, that is the point, and I think that's the beauty of the intro classes because one of the focuses is helping people realize how much horses are communicating all the time, as you experienced, and that you can listen and you can start to have that dialogue with a horse, and they will tell you where they want your help and where they want you to touch them and what's going on. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and you know what's also occurs to me about that too is, and you know I experienced this in horsemanship as well. You know when the horses are, you know they're communicating with us and we either aren't listening or aren't paying attention, or we think it's something else. We're not observing, but we're more interpreting that it's something else. And the horses, you know, they'll show us and show us and show us and show us until they, you know, stomp on our foot or have to buck us off or whatever big thing they need to do to let us know what they've been trying to tell us all along, you know. And like you said with that horse who touched you, you know, and it touched you right in that spot. And we've certainly had that experience in classes where the horses will show you exactly where it is, or, you know, just in life. They'll just put their nose on your knee or put their nose on your foot or touch your wrist or, you know, whatever it is. And then you go there and then they're just calm and quiet. I mean, there's such a huge shift in what we get to see in that moment. So, yeah, if we, I guess what I want to say is that just my experience has been that as we listen and the horses believe we're going to listen, they talk more. You know, they show us more stuff. They interact with us more. They communicate more with us.
I think they're always trying. I mean, not to negate what you're saying, but I think they're always trying. And then when they find out we're listening, they get very specific. You know, because we're listening. Like, then they can really sort of hone it down, you know?
Yeah, I completely agree.
Yeah, and they get louder, you know, like you were describing. When you're not listening, they just get louder and louder till they're, you know, and then when they're finally desperate, then, you know, things can happen. Yeah.
Yeah, like you get bucked off or, you know, whatever it is.
Right.
Okay, well, it's just 7:30 now, so I'm going to pop in this fun little poll that we have, okay, and then we'll move on. So, all right, so I'm going to create this little poll, you guys, right? And it just says, what is your interest in this healing modality? Is it people, horses, dogs, cats, or other? And then I think you're going to be able to, I'm going to start the poll now, and I think you're just going to be able to go ahead and vote. So I'm going to be curious if that little feature works. And so in the meantime, Ginger, let's move on a little bit and let's talk about I want to talk about these classes that you hold, because I think it's important for people to know that while you are gifted in what you do and you're very well trained and you have a lot of experience, that these classes are really available to help us all know that we all can do this too. And just speaking from my own experience, I know that I have definitely found confidence in knowing, you know, that I can do this work too. But can you tell us about the classes? I know that you've got 2 classes that are coming up here in New Jersey, and these are introduction classes, which are the foundation for everything that you do. So go ahead and tell us about those classes a little bit, and then we'll move on from there.
Well, the introductory class is, like you said, it's a foundational class, and it's a prerequisite for other advanced classes. It's important because what it does is my job as a teacher is to help people build faith, to discover they can do this. So it really starts with feeling energy, identifying energy, and learning how to work with energy. And though that may be a place where a lot of people get stuck with what is that and how do I do that, we take care of that in that class. That's taken care of by pretty much the end of the morning of the first day. And then by the afternoon, you're actually putting your hands on horses to start experiencing what that's like, and feeling comfortable with that, and learning about how they communicate, starting to perceive all that. And already by the first day, you will be experiencing seeing before and after changes in the horses, which I think is really astounding for people.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the second day, we just build upon that. I help people some more with how to develop their body as an instrument, opening the body to receive energy and direct it, and then we work more on horses, more specifically, sort of spending more time on a horse or just getting more involved in just getting in more depth. So, yeah.
And I know that one of the first things we do every morning, which is not a practice that I have, is we will go and sit on the landscape and we'll meditate. And I'm just curious if you can share, you know, why do you have that in your class?
Well, there's the Earth and Earth Horse Healing. Yeah, you know, after I studied at the Barbara Brennan School of Healing, and I was there for 10 years, I studied with a shaman here in New Jersey, and studied survival and the ancient skills and of the indigenous people and healing. So I also have, to juxtapose a very scientific approach of Barbara, I have a very earth-based approach to healing. And the earth is the mother and the source, and can be a powerful tool for healing. And connecting with the earth and becoming grounded is something that we all need and love. I mean, everybody who does that meditation just loves it. And the earth nurtures us, it feeds us, and supports our healing. So it's an important part.
I hear you, because I did love that too, and you know, I happen to always choose to sit in the little crook of a tree. You know, like in its roots, I feel like there's a little place there for me to sit, and it does make a difference. It definitely does make a difference. So, can you share with us a little bit about that? I mean, what, you know, I mean, you spent a long time at the tracker school, and I'm curious about how does that make a difference in the work that you do?
At the tracker school, I really learned about awareness. You know, not just with the body and healing, but with expanding that awareness to include the earth, to include, you know, all things. And I learned to find the earth as my home. I learned that the earth will provide all things to us. And I learned how important survival is, and how the skills, you can learn the survival skills, and that the way of the ancient people is also part of us and something that we can reawaken. And that those are skills that horses have and have not lost, that we've lost touch with. So that those are skills that, as we build them, bring us closer to the horse, the being one with the earth, expanding our awareness, deeply listening, and being part of the interconnectedness of all life is the way the horse lives in their natural state. So that school really helped me find my place among all things, and helped me understand the horse really more from the inside out. Does that help?
It really does, and you know, it reminds me of a time when we were having an introduction class here in the Company of Horses, years ago, and I remember we were out in the field and we were working on horses, and I remember we kind of looked around and like all the peacocks were with us. You know, and I like that you said that. It's like it is a time when, you know, like there's a connection to all things. Like, you know, like all of a sudden we notice that other beings are paying attention, you know, and they're there with us.
Yes, and I'd like to add, I think the word that comes to mind is the sacredness of all life, as opposed to the scientific approach, which still had sort of a barrier for me. You know, like the scientific approach, and it still had a level of analysis of personality types and that sort of thing, and still had a level of judgment that I find with the shamanic path that I've studied does not, right? And to me that's more challenging in many ways, because you have to really let go of all that framework in the mind, all those
yeah, the proof, the stuff everybody likes,
right?
Know, it's the whole other piece of it.
Right. So it really breaks all that down. But that's, you know, that's where the horses live. So, you know, it's important if you want to really be close and intimate with the animal. I think that's important to engage and embrace that journey. Right?
Yeah, I really like that, Ginger, because I think that's the thing that I appreciate about you is you did the work to go to the scientific school, and you know, and it was the horses that brought you there, and then, you know, you did the work to come back to, you know, like, I'm not saying that Manhattan's not on Earth or anything. It is, you know, it's like it's a whole different part of the world, you know, but you did the work to come back to, you know, the being grounded and earthy and, you know, connect with the horses and the animals in a whole nother way, you know. Follow what I'm saying there?
Yes. You know, I just want to add, it's like funny, but when I first moved out of Manhattan, and I lived in there for 10 years, I was terrified. Like where I moved there was a whole open, right behind the house that we had bought, had a whole open land space, right? And I wanted to go walk, and I went out there, and I was terrified to be in all this open space by myself. You know, I had been so raised, so afraid, you know, of this, and, you know, I was taught a lot of fear, and I was taught a lot of fear of being alone in the woods and all that kind of thing. So when I first moved there, I hadn't started at the tracker school yet, right? So when I walked out in that open space, I was terrified. I was more comfortable walking down the Lower East Side of Manhattan to my painting studio, you know, where people were shooting each other, or you know, had someone pull a knife on me one night when I was walking home, you know, like I was more comfortable with that than I was walking to that field out behind my house. So the tracker school helped me learn to be really comfortable out there, and to really, really trust that I could be out there, and it was home. It was really home. Yeah, it was interesting.
And I don't think that's uncommon, by the way. I think that when people, and horses too, you know, they say that horses that live in the city and horses that are like those police horses, they have such a hard time in the country where things are quiet, you know, probably for the same thing that you experienced. And I didn't mean to even suggest that. I mean, I love the city. I think it's just another different place on Earth, you know. That's all it is. But I like the way that you helped with that. Very cool.
Yeah.
So I'm curious about if you could share with us. Actually, let me just check in, because I'm getting some information that's telling me that my poll isn't working. So for some reason, there's no place to vote. People can. I don't know why, but I've never had a poll before, so I'll work on the poll and see if I can fix that. But so far, people who are sending me notes by way of chat are saying that they're choosing horses.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Maybe
Yes.
focused on the horses.
Yes, horses. So far it's horses. I have a question about, sometimes you work touching the body, and I'm talking about, this is when you're in the company of the animal, and sometimes, and I've experienced this myself, where the animal doesn't let you touch them. You'd be taking your life into your own hands if you tried to touch them. And could you just address that? I'm just curious if you could just speak to that, if you have a horse that just has no interest in letting you touch them.
Well, sometimes that happens. Horses, it tends to be I tend to associate it with abuse. Horses had a lot of abuse. Okay? Or some traumatic event in the past. But horses have a lot of similarities to people. One of them being is they have their defense patterns. Okay? They'll have defensive reactions. So when you're working with a horse energetically, when I'm approaching them and I have my energy and I'm carrying a lot of energy and I move into their energy field, it triggers that defense. So when horses' defense is triggered, they'll want to bite or kick. So I have never had a horse actually kick me, or really bite me. Sometimes they start to, but then it's like, no teeth. You can show me with their gums, and they get that instantly. That's the level we're communicating on. They're very good about that. But the biting is usually a reference for pain, and the kicking is usually they're basically telling me that I'm triggering a trauma. Okay, so often when they kick out, it clears. There's a clearing at the same time. But it can be very challenging work when you have some horses that have been heavily traumatized or abused. And it's really not that uncommon. Does that answer the question?
It does. And I'm curious if you find that that's, what if that's not the case? What if it's just, so I'm thinking personally of my horse who looked like she had a chronic headache. And I believe she did. I mean, she looked like she had a migraine for 5 years, I mean, she even had, her eyes were squinted, and, like the sun was painful. And I happen to know she hadn't experienced a lifetime of abuse, but, until my experience is she needed to believe you. She needed you to convince her that it was going to be okay. And then once that happened, not only was it okay, she would be quite assertive about attracting your attention and having you interact with her.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but if you remember, when I first started working with her, there was no problem. I remember you saying, I'm surprised, usually she won't let people touch her, but she'll let you touch her when I first started working with her. Mm-hmm. Because what will happen many times is the horses will let me in initially, but then once the energy starts moving, or maybe the second session, we start going deeper, and that's when it presents. Okay, so it happens different ways. I mean, there are some situations where I can't touch the horse right off. Like I had a horse once that I went to that had a I don't want to get into it because but the horse was in too much pain to be touched, so I had to work off the body. But I was able to affect change through that. But yeah, so and like I said, sometimes it'll move in and out of that depending on where things are going in the session or where it is. But it is always, like you're saying, it's about building that trust. And then as they trust you, they're more willing to go into it. Like when a horse starts to have energy move and they really like it, and then it starts to hit some blocks and it gets uncomfortable, they'll express that discomfort, and then part of my job is not forcing them but encouraging them and helping them move through those blocks and discovering that on the other side, with the lick and chew, all the releases, that it feels better. So I'm building that relationship with them so that when they when the next challenge comes and maybe it's a little stronger, that they're like, okay, yeah, and then they realize they can let go and it's on the other side, you know. So it's always that dialogue of having them on board without force, because, you know, I don't want to force them, because if I force them, then it's not healing, right? So there's a constant dialogue, a constant feel, moment to moment, and they have to be on board. And I back off. Like, sometimes is it too much? You know, like horses, when they kick up or, you know, slam their foot down or whatever, you know, I'm like, okay, I'll back off. And then, like, I had one the other day. I was working with a horse who was having a really difficult time, and I backed off, and, you know, and it's like, she turned and shoved me back, you know. Go back there, you know, and that's not uncommon. Go back there, or they'll look. Go on back there. You know, I'm not going to kick you. Just go back there. So, but I'm always reading those signals and having the dialogue, you know, for personal safety and because it's important. It's a dialogue, right? It's all about dialogue.
It's kind of one of those universal truths, you know. Just going there can be just uncomfortable. You know, like, we need to go there, but we don't want to, because we don't want the discomfort of the unknown, or what will it be like with, you know, allowing the release. You know, that's kind of like, I experience that in horsemanship all the time. You know, I call it this uncomfortable place of misunderstanding or not understanding yet, or this uncomfortable place of going someplace that maybe I've been holding on to for so long. Like, what will happen if I let that go?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And it kind of brings me to another question. And then I have a couple of questions from some folks who are with us on the call.
Okay.
Have you experienced, and this probably is going to come, I would think it would come over perhaps long term with I would say in a horse and a human relationship. You know, sometimes there's a physical brace, you know, something painful or something that's uncomfortable. It turns into an idea, you know, that the horse then holds on to, you know, I'm curious if you've been able to have both of those things disappear, or, you know what I'm saying, like a brace in the mind versus a brace in the body, or a brace in the body that the mind will hold on to. Have you had any experiences with that?
Well, this is one of the reasons that I'm so passionate about healing work, because I can go in either way. You know, it's like if I get stuck one way where the horse can't move past it physically, I go into the mind, and vice versa.
Great. And that, Ginger, that's probably that's another place that I would love for you to speak to, because it's the story of I don't recall the name of the horse, but it was a young stallion, a young colt that you were working with, and then he was gelded. And I just, you know, I know that so many people have geldings, and I just wonder, that was a profound story for me that you shared, you know, like, because we talked during the experience of going from him being a stallion or colt, he was a young horse, to being a gelding, and, you know, some of that stuff that the horses went through when that happened. And I wonder if you could just share a little bit about that.
He was 3, so he was, you know. In terms of what, his experience with that?
Well, what you experienced with him, you know, like, you know, how that was going, you know, like before and then after.
Well, it was a unique situation because he was in a family environment. It was a breeding farm, so it was not like he was. So he was with mares. I mean, he wasn't with them, but he had an idea of being needed by the mares, and the mares certainly were getting interested in him at his age, and so he saw his place, right? Because there were a couple other geldings on the property that weren't the same breed. So when he was gelded, he was really upset. I mean, he was really upset, and it was very challenging. And I worked with him in terms of healing. He asked me for help. He asked me to put my hand right down there on the wound. This was, I think I first saw him, it was, I think, 7 days after he came back from the clinic. So he had to go to the clinic because he was older. And you know, that was a case of just kicking out, you know, with my hand up there, and then, you know, him asking me to go back and work with it. But with him and with other geldings that I've worked with, you know, from my experience, they all don't get so upset about it, but some. And in that case, you know, I have to deal with the emotional pain, the heart pain, and help them come to grips with what's going on, and help them through the acceptance process. And also help them. What I found is when they do go through that and they accept it, then in another gelding, this was very apparent that when they essentially reconnect to that part of themselves, their whole body changes. I don't want to say they become stallion-like, but they start to fill back out where things started to after they were cut. How you know, the hormones change the way the body looks. I've had the experiences after balancing themselves, after they become balanced and accept the whole situation mentally and emotionally, the body can start to fill out back again where they look more, you know, get a little more neck again and get the musculature again, and then have some of the behaviors come back. Not that they're stallions, but you know what I'm saying? Just
absolutely, yeah. That's kind of the question I think I was trying to ask you before about the mind-body connection. So that exactly answers that question.
Right. So it's like where they lost that connection to their identity. I've encouraged them to have that identity back, even though they can't physically, impregnate a mare. So and it does make a difference. It makes a real difference, and it's a wonderful example because it shows. I think it shows to people, or people can hear on that, how deep this work goes and how rich the lives emotionally, mentally, and spiritually are of these animals. And how much it means to them when you as a healer or a person, whatever, can meet them with that level of intimacy and experience their pain on that level and share that with them with the intention of helping them overcome it. Okay?
Yeah, beautiful. That was really well said. Yeah, thanks for that. So we're coming down to the end of our hour already. I know I told you that was going to go quick, but there's a couple of questions. There's one question about, this is kind of a question that'll be difficult to answer, but how many sessions on average do you want to work with a client, a horse, a cat, a dog, a person?
Well, yeah, it varies. I mean, the sessions, I really recommend, unless it's an acute situation, like a month apart, because it's very powerful work, and the body needs to catch up with it. You know, like it just keeps working through them, and they go through a lot of change. It depends on the horse and the situation, but I have noticed a pattern. I mean, I think the ideal situation is 7, because within 7, like, the horse is really, really transformed. If that can happen, I think that's ideal.
Kind of the perfect number, right?
Right. No coincidence.
Is there any person, horse, cat, or dog that you wouldn't work with? Is there any particular reason you wouldn't work with any of them?
Well, if they're interested in working with me, I would work with them. If they understand my philosophy and approach and they're comfortable with that. No, I mean, there's no reason. You know, there's been a couple horses I haven't been able to help, but the owners have wanted me there to work with the horses for like 2 sessions to really help them determine what's happening, and so that they can make decisions about like what's going on with their horse. So, situations where there's some type of brain injury or development issue, brain development, or some sort of situation,
Right. So that's something that an owner would decide, but
right. Yeah.
Super.
Yeah. I mean, I always say I can always help a horse. You know, if you want to have me help your horse, I pretty much can always help a horse. But then, of course, my situation might come around. It would prove differently. I don't know.
Yeah, but not yet.
Yeah. You don't know.
And then I have a question here from a person who's with us who wants to know if you've experienced, and what have you experienced, when a horse actually lets you know they're ready to pass on.
I've never had that. You know, I've never been in that situation. I've had people have me involved in it, and the horses always wanted to stay around to the end. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, though. You know, I'm not saying that that's the way all horses are either. You know, because every horse is, like every person, is unique. But I haven't had that situation.
Cool. Well, Ginger, that was a good way to end our conversation. So for those of you who are still with us, hopefully it worked. Who knows what you guys are seeing? But I have a little pop-in that I've added, and that just is a little link, and it takes you over to Ginger's website, so you can see her 2 introductory workshops that she has scheduled for this spring. They're both here in New Jersey. One's going to be here at In the Company of Horses, and we're right smack dab in the middle of New Jersey, and one that's down in South Jersey for folks who want to travel a little more. So the workshop that's going to be here is a weekend, and the workshop that's going to be down in South Jersey is going to be on a Monday, Tuesday. So whatever works for you guys, you can just check that out. There is an early bird price that ends on 4/12, so we've got about a week, a little less than a week for your early bird, and so if you guys are interested in that, we'd love to have you. Ginger, it's been a fun hour spending with you. It took me forever to pin you down for this, so I am grateful we finally got to do it.
Yeah, well, thank you, Marianne. Thank you for the wonderful questions and adding your expertise, and I really appreciate everybody who's on the call, and I really encourage you, if you're all interested, to sign up for the introductory class. I don't think you'll be disappointed, and you'll meet some wonderful people, and you will really have your life and your relationship with horses enriched, and your understanding of them really deepened. It's as people say, it's really a life-changing weekend workshop. 2-day workshop.
I completely agree, and just from my experience, you know, Ginger, and I know I've told you this before, but my favorite classes were the chakra classes, which are classes that come later. Mm-hmm. You know, so if you guys, you know, want to learn more, you have to go to this class first. So if you can get in the spring, by the end of the year, you might get into some of the other classes. So, all right. So, Ginger, you have a great night. Everyone, thank you for being here. We always appreciate you. Bye-bye.
Bye.